welcome, Moncho. We're really excited to have you here. It's an honor.
Thanks, Saleema. It's good to be here and see a lot of known faces, friendly faces after a long time. Thank you, and good to have you here as well, Saleema.
Thank you so much, Moncho. So the first question in this fireside chat is to really understand, why do you do what you do, and what inspires you to do this work and be on the ground, and what's your why behind all the work that you're doing currently?
I mean, basically, I never think about it these days, but if you look at it and think about it, I was born in Anantapur. The place of my birth, of course, was no choice of mine, but growing up in Anantapur in India, the childhood that I had, I developed very strong roots in Anantapur. The land, the people, the culture. I've always felt part of it ever since I was a little boy, and never thought really of anything else. And then, of course, having the parents that I have, I feel very strong attachment to Anantapur and then the work that my parents have done. And it just seems like a natural progression of my life to be part of that, And I guess that's why I am where I am. Anantapur, I'd say, it's the land that gave birth to me. It's the air that I breathe, and the theme of my dreams. That's Anantapur.
Thank you. That's beautiful. We can feel the energy. We can feel everything that you're saying with so much passion, and it's very inspiring, everything that you're doing. And my next question is, where innovation isn't just about technology, right? And this is something that I talk about in my book a lot. It's really about being human, and we've seen that. Just for example, this iPhone is an innovation, right? Steve Jobs actually spent time in India searching for enlightenment when he got fired from Apple, and then was able to go back to Apple and innovate, right? He had a vision, he was able to have his team execute. And that's when the success happened, is that, that the innovation that starts from within us, and it's at a very human level. And so, things like empathy, adaptability, resilience, self-awareness, and really understanding the needs of the community are very important when it comes to innovation. And we're seeing a lot of that happen on the ground with the work you're doing. You're very much involved on the ground with the people, with implementation, working with the beneficiaries. And so, Moncho, how are you innovating with regards to how you're engaging with the local community on the ground through the RDT? And feel free to share an example or a story as well.
I mean, one of the reasons for the success and the results that we've had is the way that RDT does its work. If you look back, RDT started, in 1969? That's less than 25 years after Indian independence, okay? So you can imagine what it was like in those days. Obviously, technology didn't have much of a say at that time. But then if you look at the heart and the spirit of RDT in Anantapur at that time and now, which continues, is that we are a people's organization. Yeah. So people's organization signifies that we work with people, we're very close to people, we live with people in the villages, So that is a very key aspect of our work, is that the people, the communities that we work with are the main principal actors in everything that we do. And that's been throughout, right from the start. It's not just like someone coming from somewhere and sitting there telling someone what to do or giving some kind of help, but being part of that natural process of change, progress, development in the villages itself with the people. And I think that, you'd think, oh, that's quite a simple thing, but it's not. It's quite complicated and quite complex as well. But over the years, we've been able to, make many trials and errors and fine tune it. And I think that's one of the reasons why, if you take, for example, the primary education program that we have, in the late 70s when we started it, the entire education program of primary schools was totally funded by us, managed by us. Everything was done by RDT. And then slowly over the years, we started to hand over the ownership of it to the communities, 25%, 50%. And now if you go, there are thousands of villages where people actually run the schools. We don't anymore. We don't even fund them anymore. People contribute. Each family every year gets together, decides how much each one has to contribute. And then, they set up a separate account, put the money in it, use it to pay for the teacher, pay for the maintenance, support the kids, everything. So it depends. The timing's got to be right and the process has to be right. And then you have that result at the end.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And one thing that was very interesting is, we talked about this in the past, is something that you say is that we can't succeed without failure, right? Because failure is an opportunity for us to learn. As you mentioned, life isn't full of just success stories. We have to also examine how we've actually learned from experiences on the ground. How do we iterate when we're implementing these projects and planning for future projects? And I'd love to hear from you an example of that. Failure is a key component of innovation. What's an example of a story where you've had to learn a lot through an experience of failure?
I mean, firstly, I'd just like to say that, the word failure itself somehow makes us all hide away and run away and feel bad and embarrassed and frustrated, But what we've learned over the years is that it's not something to be afraid of or feel bad about. It's just part and parcel of life, We talk about so many success stories because, yes, they're nice and they're wonderful to see, but then you never get there without having difficulties, obstacles, failures, losing. It's a normal part. And we always try to tell our team members or in schools with kids anywhere, say, don't worry about failures, it's okay. And when we look back at it, there are so many and some quite interesting ones. You take, for example, probably in the 80s, when we used to do a lot of work which was free, okay? Free. It happens a lot in many places, not just in NGOs, but all over the place. We would give free medicines to people in villages, and people would come and just take those free medicines because they're free. And naturally, you do that because you think, okay, everybody's so poor, they can't afford it, so let's give it free of charge. And then as the program progressed and we started to, evaluate it, analyze it, go to the homes, we would find those medicines sitting in a windowsill or on a shelf. A year would be passed, or 2 or 3, and basically there was no value attached to it because it was just free. Yeah. So then that was a very nice, interesting learning process. And I can give you another one where, as well, in the earlier part, where to help rural youth, to skill them, to train them, to be able to get jobs, and to make it easier for them, we had set up a number of vocational training centers in the villages, in the very interior villages, thinking, let's make it easier for the youth there. But then the problem was that none of the good trainers or teachers would come to live in those areas. So you had this set up, but you wouldn't get good enough, tutors or trainers to come and live there. So then you'd have to stop and say, okay, fine, we'll set it up somewhere where we can get such persons. And then you set up infrastructure so that the youth can actually come and live there and stay there and learn. So it's a process. Sometimes you think an idea is great, but it just isn't practical. And you learn that the hard way. Once you put it into action, that's when you learn it. And we've been through many over the more than 50 years that have been there. Just as we have so many success stories, we have those success stories because we failed on some and learned from it.
Thank you so much for being candid and for your vulnerability. And that's very, it's great to hear, coming from a leader like you to hear about all the, what's actually happening, the transparency, what goes on the ground and how you can learn and how you can iterate and how you can turn even a failure into success. And it just takes cycles of iteration and learning and really understanding the needs of the people using, empathy. And speaking of ideas, which you just talked about, What's an example? Let's talk about an example of, how an idea became a movement, right? Because innovation starts with I, but it happens with we. It happens with our, their communities, with people. As you said, VFF is a people organization. And so let's talk about the India for India idea that, was originally there to incite philanthropic support from the village, which then grew into a whole, India for India social movement, mobilizing 200,000 to 300,000 people over the past 8 to 9 years. And can you talk about what made that project very unique and just tell us more about that project and the story behind it?
Yeah, I mean, that's I don't know what you call it, a project or something very special to me. And when people look at it now and they look at India for India, they think, oh, what a wonderful fundraising program it is. Maybe it is, or it's turned into looks like one. But the intention, the idea behind it right at the start was never as a fundraising program. As part of everything that we do, it was always very important for us. As we said, we're a people's organization where people take responsibility. And it's not just always receiving help or support from someone from wherever that is, but also taking responsibility for others, for your community, being able to do something. And you don't need to be a millionaire to do that. In fact, a lot in our culture here, a lot of people think you've got to be tremendously rich to be able to help people. But this idea of India for India changed that, So it was just an idea where wherever I went, whichever village I went to, I would speak about it. I would say, hey, why don't we do anything when we have so many people? In fact, if you look at the NGO world, from the Western world, there's so many people that contribute, which is very nice. And I think that's great for the world. But at the same time, there was something missing here. Why can't we take responsibility ourselves, do as much as we can, and then talk like that in different places. And then suddenly I got a call one day saying, Moncho, can you come and inaugurate a village where they're having hundis? Hundis are like little piggy banks, where they're going to, there was some 27 or something like that, or 127, if I'm correct. It was all the women of that village that got together and said, yes, we've decided that we're going to do something about it. And we're going to make little savings in our lives on a daily basis, put some money aside and use it for a bigger cause. It was actually a seed that was sown of solidarity. That's what it was. It was an idea about bringing people together, working together, thinking about others, thinking about society. That was the idea. And then slowly, of course, it grew from one village to another and individuals and all over the place. And over a period of few years, we have around 200,000 people that every year buy those little piggy banks, hundis. At the end of the year, they break them and they put it all together. And it's actually been quite a revolution, and it's given a huge sense of pride and satisfaction for people, because suddenly then people's little contribution, just 100 rupees in a year or 200 or 300 or something like that, but put together is big. It can really make change, and for people from the poorer sections and right from small little unorganized sector jobs that they have and living on daily wages. The majority of people are from that background. It's been incredible to see the reaction that's been there. In fact, I think human beings, it's in our nature to help. And it was just an opportunity that came up and people just took it. That opportunity wasn't there in our society out here to be able to do something like that. So when that happened, it was unbelievable, the response, and it just grows by the day.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. It's very inspiring to see how something so small, like you said, a seed can grow through community and through the movement, and how quickly that happened too, and has made such an impact. And thanks for sharing that story. My next question is, really to do with right now, we're seeing a lot of focus on women empowerment, and the focus on women, and just specifically in the mission of the work that you're doing, it's been really key, really core to all the work that you're doing, right? And so we'd love to hear from you. What's your favorite story of impact to empower these women in rural villages?
I mean, it's so difficult to pick any story, in the amount of things that we do, and in so many villages, so many hundreds of thousands of people, each with their own little story, like the India for India with those hundis. Each hundi has a little story behind it. There's a person behind it. It's not just that. And there are so many, but I remember, I guess if I had to pick one, I would pick one village, which is very close to where we have our hospital, Pattalapalli, which is quite known now because of it being officially designated a COVID hospital over these past 2 years. Late 80s, early 90s, when our DT actually started our programs in that particular village with the education program and the women's self-help groups, they had a very difficult time. Just the fact that they were part of a women's group was itself a huge thing. And there were many questions raised, and, not only by their own families, but the entire community saying, what on earth are all these women in this group for? What is the agenda? What are they going to do? It's a waste of time. They should be working. They should be in the fields or at the family doing the things that women are normally supposed to do, at that time. And one of the women got up and explained that whole process one evening in a full village meeting where all community persons were there. And her story was so strong that for the first 10 to 15 years, they were practically physically beaten by their husbands because of this change in their lives. And also because the husbands, not just because they were also sort of instigated by others saying, hey, look, what's happening? What kind of a man are you? So they were out there in front of the whole village explaining this and saying they are the ones that stuck it out. And then, of course, at the end of the meeting, the men got up, the husbands who were part of that story, saying, we thank our women for being strong and not giving up, So there's been a tremendous change. Now every family has a job. They have, cattle. They have a cow or a buffalo in their house. Every single child goes to school. And in that village, that change really is because of that unstinting determination of the women in that village. If it wasn't for them, I guess it would take much, much longer.
Thank you so much. And that's amazing, all the stuff that you're doing with the women. And it is definitely hard to pinpoint because there's so much of your work focused on the women. Can you share a little bit about how RDT has adapted during the times of COVID? And feel free to bring in more examples. I know there's a lot there. What was the COVID-19 response? I know there was a huge success around that with the mask making and 10,000 people a day and just so much going on. So if you can share a little bit about that, what's going on in the last 20 months, that would be great. We'd love to hear that.
Yes, of course, examples and stories are always nice. That's what makes everything more interesting. And I guess we're full of them, COVID took the whole world by storm. Nobody knew it, nobody expected it, and neither did we out here. And when faced with it, we didn't know what to do to begin with. But I think the work we had done over the past so many years, especially in health, that has really helped us during these last 2 years, during the pandemic. When most of the world, not just India, most of the world moved away from investment in health in rural areas, which is why you see in so many countries in the world, rural areas really struggle. Not that cities didn't, they did, but they're much larger populations and not enough infrastructure there. But rural areas were quite neglected. But that wasn't the case with us. We invested a lot in healthcare over the last 30 years and built up these hospitals, personnel, equipment, infrastructure, everything. And I think that helped us in dealing with the pandemic. We were able to, within 2 weeks of the situation getting bad, able to set up and start running. We had to shut down, of course, every other department in our hospital and dedicate exclusive to COVID. And it wasn't easy, but we were able to do it because we did that kind of investment, which is required. And I think that's a wake-up call for pretty much everybody in the world to put more in health and rural health. And when we asked one of our doctors, what's the difference between the two waves, the first and the second, and said, well, tell me in a word, and the first phase, first wave for him was basically fear. And the second, hell. That's how one of our doctors described it. It was very difficult because nobody really knew what was happening. Everybody was so afraid that when our hospital was announced by the government and by ourselves that it would be an exclusive COVID hospital, the villages surrounding the hospital went into panic mode. And we have a lot of staff from the hospital, right from cleaning staff to, so many technicians that lived in those little villages surrounding the hospital. And they were basically told that they can't live in those villages anymore as long as they work with COVID patients. So, you had to deal on one side with COVID and patients and all the sufferings and difficulties that were there. And on the other side, on a social angle, with villages where people were so afraid and you needed to bring people together to understand. And it was extremely difficult. And I think everybody everywhere struggled and suffered. Families have lost so many in one family, more than one person lost. We all know people that were lost. But I think for me, at the end of this whole pandemic, of course, everybody talks about the hospital, but there was so much other works like mask making, supporting and feeding so many migrant laborers, all that's there. But then this hospital takes limelight out of everything. But for me, the biggest thing that's come out is a sense of, hope, sense of solidarity, because what we saw, the public in district, neighboring districts really supported the work that we did, be it financially, morally, in material, in kind. It was a tremendous outpouring of support that we got. And I think that's a very good sign, because I strongly believe in the power of humanity. And I think this is one place where it was shown and the opportunity was there and people really lived up to it. And that is something that I'd like to, take away a positive thing from that whole 2 years that we've had. It's been tremendous.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So last question for you, Moncho, before we actually open it up to our audience here. Thank you, everyone. We have 30 people here today, and I'd love for you to ask some of your questions. If you want to drop them in the chat, I'll be doing some Q&A after our fireside chat. But Moncho, my last question to you is, what's the future for RDT and what's your vision? What are the priorities? And you can speak a little bit about that since you have that vision very clear.
Well, I wish we had a crystal ball and, we could see the future. But yeah, I mean, this pandemic made us think a lot, okay? It made us think a lot about where we are and where we're headed. And with the history of the work that we have done, certain things really came out and stood out for us. And one was gender. It really stood out. Work in gender, I think, is very important and will be taken into account the whole situation that we encounter. So we saw gender as a very key part of what we do. The other, of course, was environment. Suddenly, environment came to the limelight. I mean, we do a lot of work in ecology with farmers, with environment, everything, but it was never a direct focus on it. So what we're trying to do now is trying to see how we can link every sector of work that we do, be it education, health, or with women, to link it to environment, see how that's possible. So we set up a small team to start work on that. That's quite an ambitious one, but it's, I think, where we need to focus as well. And the other, which has come up in some of the things we talked about, is solidarity. Solidarity between nations, solidarity between people and communities, and as we, to the grassroots as we can go. I mean, there are so many things, but these, just to pick, like, say, three things that would be really key, I would say those things for us would be for our future.
Okay, thank you so much, Moncho. We actually have a couple of questions coming from the audience. So the first one is from Krishna. Do you still have an RDT office in Penukonda?
Oh, yes, we have an office, well, pretty much all over the district. We have our central office, which is in Anantapur, and then we have regional offices, and then we have area offices. Area offices, for those from India will understand, it would include about 2 mandals together, unless a mandal is very big, like, for example, Mudigubba. Now that's a very big area, so it would be one area. But yes, and Penukonda is an area for us, and there is a local office with a team leader and local staff in Penukonda.
Thank you. Okay, wonderful.
Good question.
Okay, awesome. So another question is, what about the RDT global footprint? Do you want to spread and expand to other countries, or what's your vision for that? I
mean, I've been asked that question so many times over the last, I don't know how many years. For that, my answer has always been the same, that we have no frontiers, no borders. It depends on the need and the resources that we have at our disposal, and the world is there. Wherever there is, like my father always said, wherever there is suffering, we will be there. And in fact, there was someone in Anantapur, now a retired doctor, Dr. Akbar, I think. Somebody had asked him about my father, who did not know anything, and he said, Vicente Ferrer has a compass, and that compass is not about north and south and east and west, but that compass always shows where the poor people are. That's why he came here. Because people always ask, why did Vicente Ferrer come here? And that was just one answer which somebody gave, from Anantapur, not from my side. Yeah.
No, thank you. Okay, wonderful. That's great. Like, it's exciting to see, at least. I mean, sometimes I think it's not about just, the same organization replicating the work in other countries, but other bringing awareness through campaigns and through, the awareness and sharing these success stories of how other, organizations can replicate some of the models and some of the things.
Actually, that I can give an example. I mean, even in Anantapur, we had started in just a handful of villages. And now we work in almost 4,000 villages in Andhra and Telangana. And also, I'm not sure how many people are aware, but we've started some work in Nepal as well. 2 small projects in Nepal working with the differently abled and kids and adults as well. It's very recent. So yeah, there are no frontiers. I mean, we can be in other parts of India as well, or anywhere else in the world.
Thank you. Exactly. I totally agree with that. And it's beautiful sharing this work. Just one more comment here, Moncho. Subbu says, congratulations to the RDT team for getting the recognition from Andhra Pradesh government and getting awarded with YSR Lifetime Achievement Award. Kudos to Moncho, Andre, Prem, and a number of other RDT team members. So keep up the good work is from Subbu. Yeah, so we have another question. We have lots of questions, actually. They all just started coming in. So another question from Krishna is, where in the state of Telangana is VFF and RDT planning to start their offices and initiatives?
Well, we already do. We have in Achampeta, there is an office. Now that Telangana has so many new districts, I'm not sure of all the new districts, but basically the entire Nalamala forest belt, RDTs work and we are present. And then also, since the last few years, in what used to be Warangal district, now it's divided to Warangal, Bhupalpalli. So we are there also in Bhupalpalli. And a few more sort of requests are there from government side and from local side in other parts of Telangana as well, which we have to assess and see if there is something that we can do in that area.
Thank you. Our next question, Moncho, is, it's interesting how our lives are really, the quality of our lives are determined by the quality of our relationships, and who we're influenced by, the impact we're having is really, it gets determined by the people around us, the people in our circles, the people that are our role models. And so this question is from Moncho: who are your role models, and do you have some influencers or mentors in your life that have really, inspired you and helped you, get to where you are today?
I mean, well, I've been lucky to have the parents that I've had, who I've seen since a little boy, and have always been amazed at their sheer determination and dedication, and the notion of sacrifice and putting others before yourself, and the values that we have in RDT, the Dharma of RDT. These are the things that have really helped me to be strong and to be the better person. It's not just important to be happy yourself, but happiness of others and society in general is important as well.
Thank you. We have a question from Sasi. Do you do any work to help the agriculture side of the community, meaning help farmers out with their distribution hurdles, or see yourself delving into that side, if not already doing that?
I mean, we do a tremendous amount of work with farmers. We have for the last 40 years or so. And that work has evolved and changed over the years. In very early years, it was food for work programs, because that was the situation at that time. Drought mitigation works. So the work has evolved, and we do a lot of work with farmers in technology, in drip irrigation, for example, or solar. There are so many different ways that one can support farmers, and farmers in Anantapur are a key segment, the main ones. 80% of Anantapur depends on farming. So we do a lot of work with them. We've never really got into the marketing side, but we do realize that is where farmers really are struggling a lot. And that's a much bigger problem, where I think we could play a role, government has to play a role. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think that's something in the future for us to look at and improve the lives of farmers that in Anantapur or similar sort of districts that are there. And if any of our members out here have any experience in that, we will be more than happy to hear from them, to write to us or something like that. And then we can take it further from there.
Thank you. Thanks, Moncho. Charu, I see your question on what are your thoughts on replicability of the RDT model beyond your current geographic sphere of influence. And this is a question because often good works gets limited to smaller regions. I think we answered most of that already, but Moncho, if you have any other follow-up thoughts on that, we can answer it.
Yeah. Hi, Charu. Been some time. Good to hear it from you. I mean, can you just repeat that question? Because there was many things in it.
Yes. What are your thoughts on replicability of the RDT model beyond your current geographic sphere of influence?
See, when we went into Nepal recently, we didn't go with trying to replicate RDT in Nepal. We built a relationship with a local grassroots NGO there. So I don't think it's just, yes, RDT is a very success story. It can be replicated in certain areas that suit it, I guess. But also we do believe in, having relationships and networking and supporting other NGOs with similar thoughts and objectives and values that are there. And we also know that there are, because RDT is big now, but we weren't like this always. We're very small, and we used to struggle with funds, and we know how the NGO world struggles in fundraising. So we would also like to support good grassroots level NGOs and build a partnership with them in their respective areas as well. So that's one way for us to be able to reach more in terms of geographical area than trying to replicate, an RDT system in another place. And we have to see how that works. A lot of big international funding agencies over the years never really bothered about the organization that they were partnering with. For them, it was always the project. We've lived with it as well. You would have a project, you would build teams, you build staff, and then one fine day, they'll come up and say, sorry, we end the project and that's it. And then you'll have to send away hundreds of people or thousands of people, and you're just left standing there. And that's something that we've been through, and we know in order to be able to do what we do, you need to build a strong team. And you can't build a strong team if you don't have stability. And that's important. So we would like to support many smaller NGOs where possible to, and work together.
Thank you so much. And speaking of, supporting other NGOs and helping other people sort of understand how to start with an idea and make a team, have the team execute the idea and make a movement. Farid has a question here. Do you have a program to train social entrepreneurs to create more campaigns and compass bearers just like yourself?
Yes, I mean, it's been a subject of discussion in the recent couple of years. We did a lot of brainstorming during 2018, 2019, and one of them was in exactly what you're talking about and what Farid's talking about. And hi Farid, good to see you again over here. You're always here with us, and it's really nice to see. And then this entire brainstorming and looking at the future just stopped, because of COVID. And now we're slowly picking it up again. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, another question, just to back up a little bit, from Miriam, is what is the RDT model? And someone else here, Moguli, asked, pardon my ignorance, but what's RDT system? So if you can just back up a little bit and explain it in some simple words for some of our audience members here.
RDT model. We are a people's organization, and we work through a community approach, community participation. These are key things in whatever work that we do. And I remember seeing one little paragraph that my father had written saying, RDT's worker is a volunteer, regardless of whether he's paid or not, and demands a high level of sacrifice. You've got to be in the village, next to the people, living with them, feeling what they feel, living the problems that are there. And the way that RDT has an approach as well, you will see many NGOs which are very specialized in one theme or the other, in education or health. But then how we saw ourselves was very different. One was that in the NGO world, NGOs saw themselves as nomads going from one place to the other. Whereas in RDT, we said, no, we're not really nomads as such. We're permanent partners in progress, change, development of the community that we are part of, but with the capacity to adapt and change depending on the situation. But so that really helped us to build that relationship at the grassroots level, having that sort of approach. So yes, RDT in that way is different from the others, and you can see. And we also believe that it's not sufficient for us to just work in one village, for example, in just one thing, in education, for example. How about all the other aspects that form part of that development of that particular, let's say, a village? So which is why we work in all different spheres of development. And that's, I think, one of the reasons for that success that we have. So you walk into a village where RDT has worked, let's say, for the last 15, 20 years, you will see change in education, in health, with women, in every single field with farmers, you will really see on the ground the change. And not just see, but if you talk to people, you will hear what one feels about RDT. RDT is part and parcel of daily life of people. It's become an integrated part of people's lives. And now after COVID, even much more.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And another question here is, so someone is asking, Venkat is asking, is RDT doing any greenhouse farming projects?
We do partner with various different institutes that work in organic farming or in green farming, different fields. But that is something where we are looking into the future, that believe that it needs to grow more. There are various challenges in that. A place like Anantapur, like the vocational training centers I mentioned earlier, getting the people that we require with the right knowledge and experience and resources is a very tough thing for a place like Anantapur. So in fact, you take that into account, the achievements become even more wondrous, that how is it possible given the challenges that are there.
Thank you. And another question here from Prem is, sewing machines, sanitary products, etc., had great impact for women empowerment in villages. Is RDT planning to create new kinds of empowerment jobs, taking advantage of the digital economy, like data entry, document scanning, jobs, etc.?
There's a lot of work going on in India on that from the government side, from different NGOs. There's a lot of work happening in that field. And it depends on the natural resources in a particular place, the interest in a particular place. And RDT has always been ready to try different things, different models, different systems, different opportunities. So I don't think that's ever a problem. We're always willing to try. Whether it succeeds or not, it doesn't really matter. Hopefully it does succeed, but one should, be bold enough and try different things. Sometimes it's difficult and seems quite challenging, and you're like, oh, this is not my key area or my focus area. But it all depends basically on the needs of the people. We go according to the needs of the people. For example, you take the Chenchu community in the Nalamala forest. They're quite what the government of course call them PTGs, primitive tribal groups. They live in the forest. They're basically, forest dwellers. And we've been working with them for the last 10 plus years. And we didn't go there with an idea of saying, hey, we will help, we will change things, we will make things better. No, what our role has been is to help them and give them the necessary tools and skills to be able to decide their own future and see how they can change their own lives and not somebody else telling them what to do. Yes, you give the support that's required, but in the end, it's got to be something, that people say, yes, this is something I want to do, and provide that opportunity for people.
Thank you. Krishna is asking, is Rafael Nadal still helping RDT? And I have an answer here from Andre that you still work with the Rafa Nadal Foundation. So for those of you who don't know, Rafael Nadal is a professional, Spanish tennis player, very famous. And do you have anything you want to share about that, Moncho, and your collaboration?
Yes, we do. For the last 10 years or so, we've just had a 10th anniversary working with the Rafa Nadal Foundation. He set up a foundation. His mother is the president there. In fact, his wife and his mother visit every year Anantapur. Nadal's been here once, but his wife and mother come every year, of course, except for the COVID time now, but come all the time. And in fact, I'll be meeting him very soon, this coming week in Madrid, in Spain. They are having their 10th anniversary of their foundation celebration in Madrid. And since we've been part of that 10 years as well, so I will be part of that little celebration in Madrid with Rafa Nadal and their foundation.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And we don't have much more time, so we're just going to take one last question here, which is from Tanvi. And Tanvi is asking, as a student aspiring to join the nonprofit sector, what is some advice you have for future generations hoping to take this path and follow your footsteps?
It all depends where you are. Depends which country you are. If you take the US, I think it has a very good atmosphere for NGOs and promoting NGO work. I think it's one of the countries that does quite well in promoting NGOs and NGOs work. In India, well, yes and no. There are things that are good, but there are things that are not. And it all depends on situations. And for NGOs, it's much harder, especially NGOs receiving funds from outside of India. There are many stringent rules and laws. So I think what I really would like to see is, NGOs have done tremendous work in India all over, but just that amount of contribution doesn't seem to get seen outside of their own little sphere where they work. So we need to be able to, promote NGOs and the work that NGOs do. Because for me, why is an NGO important? NGO is important for me because it is something that you and I can do. It's an action that any one of us can take up and do. Not everything has to sit in the hands of government and big multinationals or whatever. Then what point is there in life if everything's managed? And as we have seen over history, well, they don't manage it too well. Not just, but everywhere. And I think civil society is very important. The opinion, the ideas and actions of civil society is extremely important. There's nothing too small or nothing too big. And if one really believes that, yes, I can do my part, there are so many ways, and I think we need more people. And I am actually noticing that change. I've been seeing a lot of young people from Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, coming back into the NGO world, wanting to work in civil society, in developing their country and societies and helping the poor. So I see that, and that makes me really happy to see that side of change.
Thank you. And we see other people here in the audience. Mariam Ugarte, she's saying that she can attest to, being a volunteer for RDT is an honor and a privilege because you give, but also get much more in return. But also the recognition of the local people, even in the bus, is incredible and rewarding as people see RDT and their work with real deep appreciation. You feel protected by this reputation. So thank you so much, Mariam. And now, there's some more questions, but basically some of them are around, can you tell us how the Empower a Village program works? Which villages do you start with? And a few questions around that. So now I'm going to transition here to Andre, who's going to share a video about the campaign and Empower a Village. And then, we'll then introduce the campaign from there.
Right now, in rural Andhra Pradesh, the village of Polepalli lacks a water purification system. Families in the villages of Devagari and Nalampalli, Karutlapalli, and Sivampalli are waiting for homes with roofs that won't leak during the monsoon, and in Doan, 3,170 students need uniforms to go back to school. These impoverished communities can't afford to meet their basic needs, so escaping the cycle of poverty is almost impossible. If it isn't broken, that vicious cycle could continue forever. But you can change that. It's time to introduce ourselves. We're the Vicente Ferrer Foundation USA. We work together with our implementing partner, the Rural Development Trust, to empower villages in rural India. In the 50 years since it began its work, RDT has contributed to a 90% improvement in primary school enrollment, established 3 rural hospitals, and dispensed over $2.5 million in small business loans to women and people with disabilities. Our Empower a Village Fund gives you the chance to help rural communities in India break the cycle of poverty. So, how does it work? Let me introduce you to Venkat. Venkat works for a tech company in Silicon Valley. He has a family in India and wants to help improve the lives of people in the rural areas. So when he heard about the Empower a Village initiative, he donated right away. Venkat's contribution helped provide micro-irrigation systems for farmers in rural Andhra Pradesh. In one of India's most drought-prone regions, these irrigation systems help make farming a more efficient and dependable way to make a living. More efficient farming made farmers more likely to send their kids to school instead of keeping them home to work in the fields. Indirectly, Venkat's gift will help dozens of young people finish their education and find better opportunities later in life. Venkat's gift also made it possible for the women of farming families to explore alternative livelihoods like tailoring and handicrafts. When they are no longer needed in the fields, women can start small businesses and provide an additional source of income for their families. Usually, farmers can't afford private hospitals, even when they are sick. But with a micro-irrigation system, the farmers that Venkat helped are able to use the services of the RDT network of hospitals that provides affordable healthcare for rural communities. This prevents health problems from becoming chronic conditions. Venkat's gift made a direct difference in farmers' lives, but the indirect benefits impacted the whole village. Venkat helped break the cycle of poverty and kick off a new cycle, the cycle of empowerment, that will only continue to grow. With your help, we have already done amazing things. For example, in 2019, American donors helped women from the village of Brahmanapalli Thanda complete a tailoring training program and funded bicycles to help students in remote villages get to school. Last year, donors helped provide a home for a person with a disability in Venkatapuram village and a water purification plant in the village of Gundiganipalli, which provides clean, accessible water for 356 families. We've come such a long way, but there is so much more we could do with your help. Are you ready to empower a village?
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And please help us make this a very powerful launch. There's a lot of potential. There's so much we can do by just sharing the message with our communities, whether it's, as Andre said, sharing on social media, recording a video of yourself, and how this work, why it's so important, and how you've been supporting it. Also, one-on-one messages is very key. Sometimes social media can only go so far with the mass sort of posting, but if you just share even just a WhatsApp message, share a slide from what Andre has shared, or just the URL, the page to the campaign, can go a really, really long way. So thank you so much. And those of you who asked about my book that launched last week, it is available on Amazon. I'm putting the link in the chat. Innovation Starts with I. So if you're interested, a way to support me would be to share the book and reach as many social entrepreneurs and innovators as possible with the book. And that's pretty much it from my end. And Moncho, what would be your last words?
Firstly, thank you, Saleema, for agreeing to be here and, managing this event today. And I think your presence made it all the better. You're a wonderful person. You have a wonderful story, and it really helped the whole event today. Thank you so much. And Andre, thank you for getting everything going, and the little team that we have there, Andre, ST, and not sure how many others we have, but it's a small team trying to do quite a lot of work.
We're learning from you, Moncho.
And of course, everybody else that's there. I know a number of you, and thank you for being here today and showing your support in what we do. And so that's really great. In US, we're very not known much, like here in India or in Spain, for example. But I guess every little step is required before you can take those big steps. So this is one of those little steps, and thanks to everyone for being part of not just tonight, but over the past some years to be part and support RDT and VFF USA. So thank you very much, and hopefully We can see each other sometime either here in Anantapur or in the US.